Hello. Yes, this is working. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. Thanks, Steve, for the intro and for the rearrangement of everyone's seating. I can see it caused a lot of conversation, but not now, not while we're talking. The theory here is pushing the boundaries. Pushing the boundaries is what entrepreneurs do naturally. After all, why would you go to the trouble? Why would you engage all the heartache if you didn't feel like you were pushing the boundary, creating something new, and adding value to people's lives? We have a very distinguished panel here. We're very lucky. And with the introductions that Steve gave, let's get going. I'd like to have the panel introduce themselves and introduce the concept of pushing the boundary as it applied in your life and in your work. So tell us about your company, what you do, and how you've pushed the boundary in some significant way in recent times. Maria, we'll start with you.
I'm Maria Anselmi, and I manage a Swedish company with Bisnode, specialized in business information, analytics, and business intelligence. And I'm responsible for the southern market. And the southern market is a very flexible concept, made on purpose flexible, meaning that I can go as south as I want. What was my challenge and what was for me pushing the boundaries? For me, the challenge was to be an entrepreneur into a corporation and find a model that allowed me to fulfill the entrepreneurial spirit that I have got, but remaining within the rule of a corporation and doing it in a different country, in different countries from my own.
Very good. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Hello,
Ralph, it's on you.
Right, so my background is a bit varied. I started in finance in advisory capacity and then did a software startup. And now I'm kind of running a private family investment company. I think that in terms of breaking boundaries, the constant theme probably in what I've been involved in isn't so much bringing cutting-edge technologies to any environment, but changing the business models. Sometimes against the flow of an industry and seeing added value, significant added value coming out of adopting a different model to everyone else in the same market.
Ralph, I'm going to ask you to give us a specific example.
Well, in the software company, we work in the government-assisted social housing market in the UK, which is a market you guys are used to having competitors, and the competitors will never tell you anything about what you're doing. This is a market where everybody tells everybody everything they're doing. They share information incredibly liberally and openly, but they have no structure to actually make that information work. So back in 2000, when we had 56K and 4K modems, we brought web-delivered mission-critical services into that sector. And right now that company has a client list that owns 3/4 of all the social housing in the UK. So is there anyone else who's got a better client list? Probably not, but it's in a very thin way because we use that disruptive approach to grab market share.
Good, thank you. Galahad.
Hello, I'm Galahad. I'm a cobbler, and in Russian, which I think most of you speak, is a sapozhnik. And just like in English, when you say someone's speaking a bunch of cobblers, I think in Russian as well, you say, it has the same meaning. You say, it basically means you're talking rubbish. And the definition of a hypocrite in lots of cultures is the cobbler that goes around with no shoes on. And that is definitely what I try to do as much as possible. So I've started 3 companies, and they're definitely conventional wisdom-busting companies. One is a barefoot shoe brand, one of the great oxymorons. One of them is a high-end ladies brand, beautifully modeled here today by... and a green technology company, which is a closed-loop new sort of chemistry technology.
Thank you. Vassil.
Hi, my name is Vassil Terziev. Some people in the audience know me best for being one of the co-founders and co-CEO of Telerik, one of the first product-centric companies in Bulgaria and in the region. These days I serve as Chief Innovation Officer at Progress Software. Progress Software is a US publicly listed company that acquired Telerik in December of 2014. It was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, software exits in Central and Eastern Europe, 262 million. So it was quite a journey, and it had a lot of pushing the boundaries from 0 to a quarter of a unicorn. Finished at a quarter only this time. We had to push a lot of boundaries. First, building a product business when all of the other companies were doing outsourcing, going after international markets rather than relying on the internal one. Building a volume and velocity, buyer is user type of online business rather than the more personal one. Something that became the norm and the darling of venture capitalists and bankers in later years with companies like SolarWinds, dealing with the challenges of lack of talent and building our own academy to train people for our company, for others. Over 30,000 people have gone through the Telerik Academy courses since its inception 7 or 8 years ago. And these days, we're again pushing boundaries, myself included, and trying to bring two companies together to build something better and to defy the odds that most acquisitions and mergers don't work out and that most companies can't reinvent themselves. So, continuing the path.
Okay, good. Thank you. A couple of the people on this panel are distinguished by their support of social mission in their company endeavors. Galahad, in a particularly outstanding way. Let me put a question starting with you, Galahad. No, actually, I won't, because I know what your answer will be. I'll let you reply. Maria, let me put the question to you. Should business be a force for social good, or should it strive, is its only mission to strive to increase profits?
I think that business is sometimes what produces the fuel for a part of our life. So I think that business has to incorporate social elements. And these social elements can be very, very different from the other. Take, for example, a company like ours. It's absolutely impossible on the surface to see what could be a social engagement for a company that makes predictive analytics or collect business information. When we started our company in Slovenia first and then go down to Albania and now Romania, what we saw is that in our market, one thing that was missing, and one of the sunk costs of the difficult barriers for business and for economies to develop faster, was intransparency. A lot of corruption, not necessarily blackmailing, but really corruptions in many different senses. And what was our thinking was that if you can diffuse information as much as you can, and not just journalistic information on what is going on in companies, and in the wider possible way, you are creating a more transparent playground. And this is the social mission that we took as ours in our company. And what was extremely interesting is, first of all, that we acted gathering around us all those institutions and all those business actors that were working that were working and believed in this cause. And at the same time, we involved so much also the people working for us. They interiorized this mission, and we all have it very present wherever and whatever we do. And each of us has become really an ambassador of transparency with, I must tell you, off the records, with huge effects also on business.
That's totally off the record. But I can see why you'd want to keep it that way. Galahad, all right, now it's your turn to address the question. So we're talking to an audience of entrepreneurs, and it's one thing for a giant Swedish company with tentacles reaching down into the Balkans to have a social mission. But when you're a startup, can you incorporate that? Shouldn't you really be focusing on getting your company off the ground?
I mean, I actually agree with you that any business that is law-abiding fundamentally and provides a service to society is a social business. And I think the sort of line between social, we talk about social enterprises a lot and community interest businesses and things in the UK a lot, but I think the line is a very blurry one, and I think, any business providing, with notable exceptions, is a social business, honestly.
And yet, your company does quite a bit of outreach that goes far beyond a profit motive.
Yeah, and you could argue that's all part of brand building, and I mean, we like to think that we do good things, and we run not purely for profit projects in Africa, but fundamentally we couldn't do that if we didn't have a successful original business, and it actually is a virtuous loop of, and it's motivating for employees, and there's no question that it's a positive thing in general.
Good. Vassil, does Progress have a social mission built into its charter?
Pretty much any company has a social mission, but it's really about the quality and the values embedded in that. And for many companies, it's just a matter of PR to have a CSR policy, to give money, to have the feel-good thing, but very few really have it deeply ingrained, the principle of profits on the right ethics. That how do those two come together? That corporate responsibility is not just about PR and looking good in the eyes of the public. It's really understanding that the only way to sustainable, positive change anywhere in the world, in any field, is through intelligent self-optimization. You optimize for yourself, but through the view of what's the common good in a virtuous long-term cycle, and that really shows you that you got to take care of both the profit side, because if you don't have the profit side, you don't have the social responsibility. If you have just the social responsibility, it's not sustainable. On the other hand, if you're focused only about profit, you're better off. But in typical game theory, over the long term, you don't end up where you could if all of you came together. And if there's one thing that I believe helped the local IT ecosystem come together, is exactly the fact that everybody gave, but with this pass-it-forward approach, where you had a longer-term vision. You didn't look for an immediate return. You just knew that it's going to come around the corner. And if all companies tried to do that, many things would be much better than they are today. And I can share with you one example which shows how something, and it doesn't matter whether it starts from the profit objective or from the CSR one, as long as those two are harmonious. The thing that I mentioned about the Telerik Academy, it was more or less an instrument built out of necessity. We needed people because we were growing at 100+ people per year, and we didn't find enough trained people. So what we did was we created like a mini university which would give people additional technology skills around quality assurance, software engineering, teach them the proper practices, like 9-month rigorous program, all free. So everything was handled by the company. People don't pay, and they still don't pay today. And it helped a lot of people gain valuable skills. Some of those we hired like under 10%. All of those went to other companies, worked for us, worked for the community, raised the bar for everyone. And now other people are using that example. There's more and more things happening, and it just helps create a better and healthier ecosystem. But it was always not just for the common good. It was also our self-interest to really create good people for ourselves to drive our growth so that we can fund even more and more initiatives.
That sounds very worthy. Ralph, do you want to take up this question?
I think the interesting part of your question was, is it important at the early stage of a business?
Yes.
I'm in an interesting position in that I've started a business, and I didn't make at all public within the business the kind of social bias. Because you cut me, I bleed capitalism. But I'm also a great believer in business is a fantastic tool to solve problems, whether they be social problems or commercial problems or anything else. It is the most effective tool. And it was my team that dragged me to the point of saying, can we be more public about why we do what we do? And when we got to that point, we ended up having people coming for job interviews and openly saying, I know you think you can't afford me. I know you think I shouldn't be applying for this job, but I want to come and work here because. Now, the other thing is that I'm also in a privileged position of buying into businesses. Now, changing the culture in a business to find a social goal is a lot harder than doing it from scratch. And I agree with Vassil. We shouldn't be setting out social goals that are not aligned to our commercial goals. And I was giving an example last night. KPMG in the UK, one of their prize staff engagements in the community is for the staff to go and read to children in schools. That's great, but they're accountants. They should be teaching maths to children in schools. So there's a disconnect. So we need to align the social goal to the commercial goal, and then actually we make more money. Because it's something Guy was saying, it releases emotional energy from the staff, engagement, enthusiasm. They stay 10 minutes longer, an hour longer. They get this stuff done because some of them are driven by the social motive as well as the profit motive.
Yes. All right, good. Let's move on to a different question, but because the question of culture has come up. Culture is a way to foster a social mission within a company just by example, without making an express part of the company's goals. But culture is a fragile thing in a company, and boundaries arise between departments, boundaries arise between people. This is something that I've noticed a lot since I've taken over my role at Inc. Galahad, what do you do at your company to keep the boundaries that tend to erect themselves just out of kind of human nature between departments, between people, between functions at your company?
Yeah, we do naked mud wrestling every morning. No, not really. I think one of the things that we do is we don't have any bonuses for anybody. I don't think bonuses work at all in small businesses. And so the management team is all equally incentivized around the total result. And then we run I think transparency is an incredibly important word, and we heard one of the speakers talk about that yesterday. We run a very transparent operation, and everybody knows basically everything that's going on, very live, full information on a weekly basis. And
could you elaborate on that? Does everybody at the company know the profits, the quarterly profits? Do they know how much the managers make?
Yeah, so pretty much. All the management know that, and so therefore it's not particularly secret, as it were. And, you know, I come from a Quaker family, and a lot of the best businesses in Britain over the last 200 years have been built by Quakers, and the Quaker philosophy is that the business is there to serve society, and you innovate in order to improve your product and your service for society, and there's a very low pay differential between the top paid worker and the lowest paid worker. And you know, I think that sort of culture and ethos is, you know, can be very powerful and work well. But it all comes back to, I think, transparency.
Maria, Galahad has taken transparency to a kind of quantum level beyond what you were talking about. At your company, do the managers share their salaries with everyone else? And are the company's financials available to anyone who asks? And would you like that to be different if not?
Manager salaries, unfortunately, we have developed a model that identified the salary of the managers. So we have got a tool that can be applied on all the economy. So there is nothing to if the model works, then everybody knows our salaries. So good enough, no problem, it's maths. As for the financials and how the company performs, yes, we have got constantly briefing. Constantly means we've got monthly briefing on this topic. I write a newsletter with all the commentaries and share also the slides that I prepare for my financial review. What we want to incentivize with that? Simply, you were talking of boundaries between departments, or boundaries between management and the rest of the company. I'm pretty convinced that these boundaries are made because of fear or protection, what people want to protect something. They want to protect their privacy, they want to protect their habits, they want to do their job the way they want, so they protect themselves. And what we're trying to do also through this communication, or simply mathematical communication, financial data, is trying to eliminate this fear. One of the exercises that you have been practicing is the so-called internal internship. So we take people from one department, those who apply for that, of course, from one department, and they go and stay on another department for 1 week every month for 1 year, for example. This is also to make people understand what the others do, honestly. And another rule that we've got, a very strong rule, that we have got in our company that is a sales-oriented company, is that whoever comes, hire director, a secretary, whoever, has to book for 15 days, has to book meetings for the sales agents. In this way, they come in direct contact with all the clients. They understand what they ask, what they are fascinated by, what works, what doesn't work. If they're pissed off, they get all the insults from the customers, from the boss, from the salespeople. And so they understand what means being in that position. So internal stage and a lot of information.
Ralph, when are boundaries good between departments? Shouldn't some secrets be kept and some privacy be observed?
I was looking forward to the last question. Now you give me a new one. Broadly, no. I would say, in my experience, where a business has been in trouble, where they have democratized the problem and just told the entire staff group exactly what's going on a confidential basis within the company, the best solutions have come forward. And so I was just going through my head. I'd say in most of the companies that I'm involved in, everybody will understand how the business is trading on a day-by-day, week-by-week, or month-by-month basis at a minimum. I think that it's a difference between, should they have secrets? No, I don't think they should have secrets. I absolutely don't. But should they have their own interests at heart? I don't think that either. I think most things in business are simple to talk about and hard to do. Within a management team, you've got 5 or 6 people. You should have one goal for the year. So if I was sitting and we're doing something on this table, I'd be saying, right guys, what are we going to achieve by Christmas? What is the one thing we're going to achieve? And the IT people will be saying product development, and the sales guys will be talking about how many acquisitions, and customer service will be talking about retention. And I'd want to know, okay, well, all of that, just boil it right down. What's that one goal? And once you've got that, you flow out from that, such that the next meeting, the IT guy can talk about the goal and how he is moving towards that goal. And the finance people can be sacrificial about what they're doing, saying, well, we could stop doing this if that gave you more resource to get to our shared goal. So, no, would be my answer.
Good. Let me put the same question to you, Vassil. So should there be boundaries? Are some boundaries good at your company?
I think boundaries are good when it comes to execution, so that everybody knows what they're responsible for and how they will be judged. But there shouldn't be boundaries in terms of how it all comes together to create value. And most of the places where, in my humble experience, things go wrong is when everybody is focused on the doing rather than on the thinking how what we are doing together creates value. So when you don't have an alignment of the mission, the vision, the goals that drive that, the value that you're creating for customers and how everybody participates, you don't map out the whole organization to this value creation process so that you can make the intelligent trade-offs, that's when you build the walls, because I don't know what's in it for me if I give you some part of my budget. I don't know why to make this sacrifice. Whereas if we're all aligned around a goal and we know how each one participates towards the achievement of that goal and value creation process, then I'm much more willing to be collaborative and to share. And when you couple that with a very good operating model where you have clear roles and responsibilities, you know how the inputs are used to create an output, how that is translated into downstream work, you really alleviate a lot of those artificial boundaries. The fear and the anxiety comes from not having a good structure and our innate desire to protect ourselves, which is very normal. And now when I see this behavior, I try to build a better process, to build in better communication, to rethink the goals, and most of the time you see that that's where the problem is. It's not with the people. It's essentially how you've set up people for success or failure.
All of your companies sound very positive, transparent, social missions, boundaries broken down. So what would I have to do to get fired at your company, Ralph?
Going back to Linus's point this morning, I don't mind failure so much. I mind failure when someone does the same thing again. I think Einstein's theory of madness is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. So if you're doing that, you get fired. I think if you are, interestingly, I would fire people who were not, no matter how good they were, who were not driving towards the common goal. One of the ironies in the software business, where we use the Belbin test, which is a very simple psychometric test to see how people work in teams. And we identified that the people we had the problems with were the ones who came out as experts. And the reasons we had problems with them was they didn't share information. They just held it for themselves, which is a natural proclivity. And I would say, as a general attitude to working in teams, you have to own the team goal. If you're there trying to meet your goal for your career advancement and your monetary situation and everything else, I would probably end up falling out with you. If you're there to drive the team and work with the team, then we're going to get on fine.
Galahad, what would I have to do to get fired?
I think, honestly, Ralph put it fantastically well. And I mean, there's a lovely story of when Kennedy visited NASA in the 60s, and he went up to the janitor and said, "What do you do here?" And said, I'm here to put a man on the moon. And, you know, I think that's the point. And then I couldn't articulate it better than Ralph, the rest of it.
Maria?
Yeah. I have to connect to something that Ralph said before. So in our company, we normally do get focus on 2, maximum 3 objectives, and we see that we fulfill them in a couple of years, 2-3 years. So we call them our strategic cycles. When a strategic cycle is concluded, we change the goals and we have to change the organization, because otherwise the organization would not support the new goals. What does it mean? It means that, first of all, when you change the organization, when you change the goals, sometimes you need different competencies, sometimes you recreate an organization in a completely different way, and in this loop, there might be people that are fired. And this is one of the cases, and it happens constantly and every year in our company. The other point is that we have got a certain pace of development, and possibly what I'm saying is not very popular and sounds a little bit rough. We have got a certain pace of development, and we every year say goodbye to all our colleagues that have not been developing fast enough. So what happens, this is normally, it's not a traumatic process for the company and also for the people. Of course, we give them a lot of help to them, but the company is used to that. Is used to see that we need to grow fast, and we have to grow our competencies to come together with the company, with the rest of the company. It is also, how can I say, an example to put one pace on what is needed to be achieved. And it's a push for everybody to see that he has to fit. He has to fit with the kind of development that we wish to achieve. And this is valid also for myself, of course.
All right, good. Vassil, I'm not going to ask you what I would have to do to get fired by you, because you would never hire me in the first place.
And because as a public company, you have a lot of options.
Let me put a question to you, though. Entrepreneurs are, by nature, visionaries. They're driven people. They are creators, not necessarily detail people. And then, in the arc of an entrepreneur's evolution, you pass from that startup stage to leader, as you have done. So what would you say, at this stage, is your greatest weakness as a leader?
So I'll get to the answer of the question, but I'll start with something that I found the hard way, trying to understand why great people sometimes don't fit in a company and are not able to create the results. And this led me to some thinking that basically you can bucket people in 4 types. Idea person, who has a really creative mind and they're really good at seeing the future, but not terribly good at acting on it. You have the builders, which are capable of taking such ideas where somebody saw the future and making them materialize. Really scrappy, taking everything together. So that's where most startup guys fit. Then you have the scalers, as I call them, which take an idea like that and then scale it to a big organization, well-working model. They're not terribly good at building, but they know how to make 10 from 1. And then you have the people who are really good at operating, who would clean up everything. They can't fix, they can't build, but they're amazing at making it run like a clock. So my weakness, at least the one I see, is that I have always seen success a function of the scaling part and the operating part. And I personally am working a lot to do things that I didn't do in my early days as an entrepreneur. Institutionalize my knowledge, build process, build systems, so that everything I and the team learn, becomes the knowledge of the whole organization, because that will give us scale, that will give us then the ability to very easily operate, fine-tune what's not working. And it's a challenge. I'm pushing my personal boundaries, but I see it as needed if down the road in 5-10 years I want to build a big company. Because if you don't go through that process and you don't master all 4 disciplines, you're one of the CEOs that the train leaves behind, as Maria said. And I've seen people like that, and it's unfortunate when you build a company, you make it successful, and then your VCs tell you that it's time to move on just because you can't scale the company, you can't operate it as a mature business. And I mean, I would encourage everybody from the startup guys to see where they fit in those 4 categories and see what they need to do in order to evolve with the company as it grows.
I think that's good advice. Having put you on the spot and asked you to confess your weaknesses as a leader, it's only fair that I confess my own, which is that I too often forget what I've told people to do, and then either get upset that they're doing what I told them to do that I forgot that I told them to do, or am surprised when something is done that I asked them to do, and then they don't get any credit for it. I think this is nature's way of telling me that I'm trying to do too many things, that I should delegate. So, mea culpa. We'll spare the confessionals for another, yes, right. But Ralph, what Vassil was saying about the types of people that are needed to build a company reminds me of what we were saying last night about visionaries and operators. Talk about the types of people at your company and how you arrange them and how you try to make sure that you have the right mix of the right types.
I think it's very different across the phases. So one of the things we were talking about before was, what do you look for in a leader? So at early stage, one man and a dog running a company, what do you want in a leader? So for me, if I'm backing someone, and I have got a company that's got one guy in it, and I want principles. So is this guy on the same page as me in how he's going to do business? Or when it gets tough, is he going to do a deal which I wouldn't be happy with? So we've got to be in the same place with principles. Another one is positivity. Again, Linus's point this morning. There's always a role in a team for the people who are saying what if, and that they add a lot of value. But in an early stage, a leader has to be positive, has to be able to see the future and believe they're going to get there. And then the final one for me, which is really important all the way through business, is plan B. So there's a quote I came across by James York, who's a mathematician and chaos theorist, who said the people who are truly successful in life are the people who are good at plan B. And this, to me, isn't about, thinking about it this morning when Linus was talking, it isn't about failing with plan A. It's just that we're always looking for plan B. And plan B is how we get better, how we evolve, how the product advances, and also how we deal with our problems when things do fail. I think later on, when you've got a team, and there are 5 or 6 people around the boardroom table rather than just 2 or 3 pretending to be good at everything, the team dynamic and the shared goal that I was referring to earlier are the key things. Don't hire just people who can hit the ball out of the park all the time if they're not willing to play with other people. Good.
Galahad, do you want to tackle the question about getting the right mix of talents and personalities?
Yeah, I think obviously you've got to get the right people on the bus. It's probably the biggest single challenge in any business, and as we're discussing, different stage businesses need different conductors and ticket masters or whatever. And I think that's a never-ending challenge. Hire slow, fire fast.
Maria, if you slotted yourself into one of those types that Ralph described, or or a type that you kind of consider one of the species at Bisnode, what would that be? How would you classify yourself, and what kind of other employee do you get along with best?
Yeah. I would classify myself as a disobedient. I'm a very disobedient person, unfortunately. And I'm also not hiding my disobedience.
You're fired.
I risk it every day. I follow the rules and I break the rules with a lot of loyalty, telling in advance that I'm going to break the rules. So I play on transparency. If anybody does not accept that I'm going to break the rules, they're just to lift their hand and say, go. But they didn't till now. For the last 14 years, they didn't manage to. So this is one thing. And the people that I like around me are also disobedient. Are also people disobedient, people that are loyal in their disobedience. Also, I've written something on the walls of my office. And it's a quote by Nelson Mandela in which I believe mostly, and it's that winners are dreamers that never give up. So I like to have around me, and I'm myself a dreamer, somebody who can intensively desire something and would never give up until this thing is realized. This is a profile of people that I like to have around me. Although most of my managers are very different from that, so that they can be challengers toward me.
I would imagine that finding challengers, if you're that kind of disobedient person, is not hard to do at your company.
Yes. Until I get the highest profitability in the group, I've got a lot of theoretical challengers, because then I say, oh, okay, fine, bring this profitability. And so a lot of talks end on the line of results.
Vassil, the definition of leadership has changed a lot over the past decade even. It's probably because more offices have equal part women and men in roles of responsibility, maybe cultural shifts that blend more cultures together. How has leadership changed at your company? And how do you see it evolving in the future?
I think it's really, really hard for me to answer that, just because you have lots of layers of leadership and management. I can tell you what's my concept. My concept is that regardless of where you are in the organization, if you're responsible for other people, you have to lead. You don't manage. You manage yourself, you lead others. And leading others means setting the right goals, painting a better future, having clarity on how you're going to get there, inspiring people to persevere through the hard moments, because whether it's a small team or on a company level, you always have those bumps. It's not like this. It's ups, downs, bumps. And your role as a leader is to lead exactly in those moments, set the tone, so that if everybody else is negative, you're the one who's positive. If everybody else is down, you lift them up, and not allow yourself to feel victimized at any point by circumstances or people or within the company. And just your level of responsibility as a leader grows as you grow in the hierarchy of the organization, just because the challenges are bigger. But the core characteristics of a good leader, I haven't really seen change. And many of the good leaders, whether it's a team lead managing 10 guys in the engineering team or a GM managing a lot of business people, they all share these same traits. Positivism, deterministic view of the future that it's in their control, and they lead others to that beautiful future.
Good. Let's talk a bit about technology and how technology is pushing the boundaries at all of our companies and all of our existences. Do you have any concerns? Well, I think that question actually was, I was going to say about technology as a double-edged sword, but that question was very well phrased from the floor this morning and well answered by Jim. So let me ask another question. What are the most promising technologies that you're seeing in your business, either sort of affecting the way you do business or affecting your partners, and you're seeing changing things at large for the better? Galahad?
I'm in the consumer goods business, obviously, in manufacturing, and so there are massive advances going on in manufacturing, particularly around automation. The robots are slowly taking over, and obviously sort of ultimately heading towards 3D printing. Already some shoe companies are offering 3D printed shoe solutions, bespoke solutions. And then the other side around technology, which is really around ancient wisdom and modern technology. And I think through modern technology and scientific advances, I think we're actually discovering that Mother Nature isn't so bad after all, and we're sort of finding actually to go back to a lot of natural principles and first scientific fundamentals, and that's particularly the case of shoes. Not many shoe technologies actually work. There's another example around, I think, bacteria in the stomach. Now with advances in microscopic technologies, they're understanding the sort of gut flora needs of the human body, and how the sort of modern sanitized world we live in with too many antibiotics, and even the food we eat is massively sort of and full of antibiotics, and our bodies are kind of not able to cope with with so little healthy flora and bacteria. And funnily enough, apparently one of the sort of big health tips of the future is to take hunter-gatherer turd suppositories, which is perhaps a difficult thing to understand, but it's a great example of...
Well, go ahead and explain it.
It's a great example, I think, of modern technology bringing back ancient wisdom. And so, I mean, anyway, what I was talking about was actually, an idea is you need to literally take a hunter-gatherer poo and stick it up your bottom to repopulate your stomach with healthy bacteria. And we've only understood that through modern technology, and I think there's lots of interesting sort of fundamental health things like that that are exciting in my business, which is around natural movement and health.
Well, thank you. I want the crowd to know that I didn't know that we would go there when I asked that question. Ralph?
Specifically in the software side, I would say there's more an approach rather than a technology, which is for the general user in a complex business environment, see their user interface simplifying massively, almost getting down to kind of iPad level of interaction at your desk. So really focusing in. We found the most powerful word that we've had in that business in the last 8 years is no. Does your thing do that? No, it doesn't. Does all these things really well, but you can't have that. Because the peripheries, the bells and whistles people want, they don't actually need, whether they need it or not. So I think how far we can push that in that sector is really interesting. And then the converse is really clever well-delivered analysis of the data that's behind it for the people who really need to do that. So how simple can we make your life at your desk, in your office, through the tools that we're providing for you?
Good. That data analysis sounds like a perfect cue for Maria.
Yes, of course. So I will not be so inventive. For us, what is extremely important is happening is the capacity of elaborate a vast mass of data. Very perspective also image recognition technologies and matching technologies, because all these can allow us to connect the offline and the online world, to connect how reality appears to how it is quantified. So of particular interest, the combination of these three areas, I would say.
All right, good. I'm going to ask us to go through, everyone to do a quick answer, a lightning round, to wrap the session up. So it is the one boundary in the next 10 years that it's going to fall that will surprise the audience most. I will start with you, Vassil.
So the one boundary that I think is gonna fall is the one between the different functions in the organization, that we're gonna have real-time organizations focused around customers. So you have a real-time personalized connection to each and every customer. I deeply believe this is going to happen in the next 10 years by the advancement of technology and many other factors that are coming together to really force us to do that. And that's going to change all of our lives and experiences.
Excellent. Galahad.
The boundary I hope will change in the next 10 years is the boundary between our feet and the ground, a reconnection between our brains and our feet, and Mother Nature, a reconnection with our purpose as humans.
Great answer.
Technology moves so fast, I'm not going to give you a technological answer because in the next 10 years, whatever the biggest thing is going to be, hasn't been thought of yet. But I think one of the biggest influencers in the next 10 years is going to be the growing middle class. On a global basis, half the world live on $2 a day. It'll be just 3 billion people, in 10 years' time, that will be massively smaller. We will have a consumer environment which is massively different on a global basis. So I think that's a massive barrier that's going to come down, and it will radically change how we approach and what markets we look at to serve.
Thank you. Maria.
I think for me, and it's really a strong hope, is our capacity to accept and integrate. We are, I think that besides all these technological waves, we are assisting to something that is epic, and it's the flow of migration. As an historian, I've seen all the big cultures, all the big civilization in the past have fallen, have been swept away by massive migrations. So I think that is of extreme importance that we at one point understand how to accept and integrate who's coming over to Europe at least.
All right, thank you. Well, there you have it. A future with a massively larger middle class receiving customer service of which they was never before possible, migrating across borders barefoot.